Welcome to episode 115 of the Kaiju Network podcast. I'm your co-host, Kent, and with me is your other co-host,
Jason. How's it going, folks?
And this particular episode, we are covering the 1956 sci-fi entry by Daiei Studios, who is now under the Kadokawa umbrella, Warning from Space, or otherwise known as Spacemen Appear in Tokyo. And I think unless there's something you want to cover too, Jason, that may be the only thing that we will be covering this particular episode.
Well, I know that I have seen I have a webpage that I saw the other day of a pre-order for the upcoming, was it the anime Godzilla of the Mech Godzilla figurine. I don't even know where that's at. If I can find it here, I'll definitely forward that to you here in the chat.
Good, because I just realized I wanted to pre-order. It's the Bandai, right?
I believe so.
If it is, yes, I would like to have that link. I thought about that this morning when I was doing my notes for this show, and I'm thinking, shoot, because I've seen a few of those links, and now they're buried deep in my Facebook feed and all that. So now I don't have a link.
Yeah, and the other thing I kind of want to point out, since we're going to be kind of taking a little break, kind of like what we mentioned in the previous episode, due to the parents heading brain fart here, coming to your house next month and everything, and you'll be pretty busy, obviously, and then with that, we're going to have the G-Fest episode coming up. So at least that'll give me some time to get some things ready on my end. And it also give me some time to actually work on the website and actually get that over to the WordPress.com spiel. Because right now I have that on my personal Bluehost account. So I want to kind of get all that stuff taken care of. And as well as, I know I kind of briefly mentioned to you about kind of doing those little advertisement cards or something for our podcast and everything, and do all that for the G-Fest. So I was planning on doing some of that during our kind of little break that we have here through June.
Yeah, and that's one thing I'm glad you brought up, because we will not have at least episode 116 and 117, at least in the regular order that we would have coming up, for the reasons that you just stated. So after that, depending upon the schedule and all that, we may be covering the G-Fest schedule, if that is out by that point in the latter part of June. And then part of it's going to depend too on when you come up here and when we can kind of collaborate all that. So we will just keep everyone posted, but I think we should, barring any sort of unforeseen circumstances, we should be able to bring at least episode 116 to everybody before you come up here. And what that topic will be, we are not quite sure yet. But my feeling is that it very well could be the topic of the G-Fest the G-Fest schedule. If not, then we will continue with what we have down on the schedule. I don't know what that is. I don't have it up here with me, and it would take a moment for me to bring it up, so I'm not even going to bother with that.
I think the next film that we were going to talk about,
it's Golden Bad, I think.
Yeah, I think that's what it was.
Yeah, I think you might be right. I think that it will be Golden Bad if that ends up being the case. But something we definitely would like to try to do. But of course, a lot of it depends on the timing of everything. We would like to do the G-Fest schedule too. But it just depends on when it comes out. There have been some years where it comes out literally the week before the convention starts. There have been times too it's come out 2-3 weeks before the convention starts. So
Yeah.
a lot of it really just depends on when that is released. Anyone who's been paying attention to some of the Godzilla groups on Facebook, or even the I think it's the GFan Twitter account, some of you will already know some of the artists and some of the dealers that are there already. My understanding is that most of the dealers are in place. However, I guess there are still some more to come. That's what I've read. So yeah, we'll just kind of have to see how everything goes. But at some point, yeah, we're going to do some sort of G-Fest schedule thing, whether that will be on an actual podcast, or heck, if they are late with it, then it'll have to happen when we are in Chicago, awaiting the hotel. So.
And by the way, I sent you the link here on the group chat to that Mechagodzilla figurine. It is Bandai.
Ooh, that's the one. That's the one I want.
Yep.
By the way, speaking of Godzilla anime, some of you on Facebook will have noticed that there's been this poster going around, because today, not today, yesterday was the day in which part 2 of this anime is coming out in Japanese theaters. So there's been this poster going around, and it appears like it's teasing Ghidorah. And I understand a lot of people are not too thrilled about this Mechagodzilla. I get it. I understand it. I personally kind of dig it. But all of a sudden now people are becoming incredibly excited about part 3. And I just have to say that, look, you know, I can't remember if you, Jason, said you liked the first anime Godzilla or not, but
I did say that I recommended it as a definite buy.
So we're like one of a few fans to have not only endorsed the first anime Godzilla, but we both also basically said, look, this is a series you want to get around to, and that we know going into this particular anime series that this is a 3-parter. I mean, they made no secret about that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as I've always told people, when you know that that a story is going to be part of a series of films or shows or whatever, that usually the first one, depending upon how many entries there are, in this case there are 3, usually in a trilogy, the first entry does a lot of the setting up for the story, not just for part 1, but also really for the entire trilogy. Now, it doesn't set all the ground rules, but it helps the audience kind of get set in the ground world that you are about to enter for the 3 series. So I remember I and a few other, Jason and a few other fans across the interwebs have been basically telling everybody, look, not only is part 1 actually good, you will want to stick around for this entire trilogy. This will be well worth your time, because, look, not only does this give a good shot in the arm to the Godzilla franchise, which it really does need right now, but at the same time, this will continue to expand and grow and turn more into the sort of movie that you want it to be.
Yep.
And I think now people are all of a sudden, you know, they may not like the Mechagodzilla design, but I think people are gradually getting more curious about part 2. And obviously, according to the poster and the reactions that have been seen up to this point, people are definitely getting excited about part 3, which is supposed to be out later this year in Japan. So, you know, I usually don't toot my own horn that often, but I just have to say, we kind of told you so, you know, because I heard so much negativity around, you know, that first anime, and I keep telling people, I'm like, yeah, it may not necessarily be what you want, but you need to stick around, because all of this will count. All of this will matter as we progress through this series. It will all pay off, and that once part 3 is done and the story has concluded, everything will make sense, and you will want to purchase, you know, this entire trilogy on Blu-ray when and if we ever do get it. So,
Right.
you know, you need to, you know, just be patient, and you know,
Yeah, it's like a lot of people just don't have a whole lot of patience anymore. So just sit tight and just just kind of go through and see what part 2 is all about, and then we'll get more of what's going on in there, and then eventually we'll kind of see the entire climax of what everything's going on in part 3 later this year.
yeah, I mean, we'll learn an awful lot here in a little while. But yeah, I just I you know, like I said, I just kind of I told you so.
Right.
And I've been, again, been telling people this has been well worth it. Of course I can't read Japanese. I'm trying to pre-order. I'm going to see if Amazon Japan has it, but yeah, CD Japan I don't think has it.
What are you
But
looking for exactly?
that Mechagodzilla Bandai.
Oh, I think on that right now, that's just, was it pre-order?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not coming out till November.
Well, it shows here. Looks like on this third line on this page that I sent you, it looks like it was maybe a pre-order for, is it May 18th, which was yesterday, and then something on July 23rd, and then looks like something November there. So I
think it's safe to say that it probably isn't going to be available for G Fest.
Yeah, so it looks like it'll be out. Oh, I think on that week when GFest 25 concludes. So like later on that week.
Mm-hmm.
So should we get on with the film review here?
Sure. So again, we are covering Warning from Space, or Spacemen Appear in Tokyo by Dai Studios. And here's the plot overview of the film. Aliens called Pyrans warn Earthmen, more specifically the Japanese, about a rogue planet named R rushing towards Earth. Nuclear weapons don't move planet R off course, but a scientist's secret formula for a new element called urium is the key. The Pyrans make a bomb with the new element and shoot towards planet R, destroying it, and the world is saved. And this was based off of a novel by Gentaro Nakajima, who also helped write the screenplay for this particular film. I tried doing some research on Gentaro Nakajima, really couldn't find a whole lot other than a few of his producer movie credits. And of course, you know, again, there still wasn't even a whole lot there. I watched the Japanese version of this film. You watched the US cut of this film. But also, I didn't realize until I stuck my disc in and I fiddled around with some of the like audio and subtitle options. I actually also had on my Japanese cut the English dub as well. So I actually watched the Japanese film with the English dub. And so really there was only one scene that I noticed that was cut out of the American cut of the film. And that's when the film was strictly where the audio was in Japanese. And it's a very small piece at the beginning of the film. It doesn't really matter. It's a segment where Dr. Kimura just left the sake bar and someone was calling him, I believe, at that same bar. And of course, he wasn't there. It was a throwaway scene, so it didn't matter. Also, I realized with this particular version, too, there is a huge difference in that the US cut added another scene at the end. the scene in which our main pirate alien, who turns into the actress Hiroki Aozora, the actress in the movie, the character, and we see the reverse transmutation of that pirate alien going from Hiroki Aozora to back into the pirate alien. That is not in the Japanese cut. So those are the big differences as far as the actual kind of the cuts and the edits. Otherwise, there are differences, yes, in the dialogue, as to be expected. I noticed a lot of the dialogue with the US either somewhat matched up with what was being said. Some of it was vague in the English translation. Other things were definitely way off in the English translation. Other things were said correctly, but in a different order, too. So, by and large, if you're thinking that in terms of actual scenes, that the Japanese cut is severely different from the US cut, that's not the case with this film. If you bought the US cut from Alpha Video, you're not really missing anything. Because, like I said, the scene that I talked about that was in the Japanese cut but not the US, throwaway scene. It doesn't matter. So,
yeah, I could definitely tell when they did that cut to the ending part on the American version, where when you had the children come out from that science observatory, and when they were kind of dancing around, you kind of hear the ending music, but then all of a sudden got cut to that scene with the pirate alien going into that transfusion little chamber there, and then reversing back to its original form, and then all of a sudden then the ending credit title card comes in with that same music that kind of got cut in.
Well, I'm surprised I never thought of that before, because I've seen the US cut 2 or 3 times, and this is either my third or fourth time seeing the film. And I first saw the film. When did I buy the DVD? I'm trying to remember. It may have been 2016. I bought it. It was 2016 or 2015. I think it was 2016 that I picked up this film. So I've only watched it a few times, and yeah. So I'm surprised I never caught on to that. I just realized it just was kind of interesting, because the reason why I remember that particular moment in the film, where at least in the US cut you have the reverse transmutation of the alien, I remember it very specifically because the original transmutation took a while to do. And then when they did the reverse, it took a while to do that, as well, too. And I just always didn't care much for that part of the film, even though the transformation sequences are really great. I just thought they were too long. And I've got an interesting little thing coming up as we discuss this film that basically will more or less say that, yes, that took long, and therefore this movie took too long as well, among many other issues with this film. So, yeah, this I just remember it because it was so different, and it just stuck out because it was long, and I thought kind of unnecessary.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking the same thing too. Even though this transmutation part was much better than the Manster, when they were kind of doing that transmutation of that guy when he got separated from that monster that was kind of transmutating within him. It was of course much better, but I think they probably took a little bit too much time with it, where they probably could have at least have cutting out maybe a few or probably several shots for that there. But yeah, I can remember at least seeing parts of the movie here and there. I think I might have seen some of it when I was at your place one time,
No,
or when you brought that movie over to one of the G Fest that year, and
it
I think you were
was.
watching it that time.
Yeah, I brought it over because at that time I had purchased it like 2 or 3 months before G Fest that year. And like I said, I think it was 2016, but I took it to that G Fest that year, and I walked away from it. And at the time, I thought it was an okay film. I didn't think it was great or anything like that, and I could understand why I had really not heard much about this movie at all. Quite frankly, I mean, I accidentally stumbled upon it. I think a year or two earlier, just doing some random Japanese sci-fi film research, and and I walked away from it. I was like, this is decent. Maybe Jason might like it. And I knew you hadn't seen it. So I took it to G Fest that year, and I knew you had seen bits and parts of it when I had brought it over to G Fest that year. I don't think we ever finished it. I think we came somewhat close, but I don't think we actually ever finished it. But I have to say this, and these are sort of my initial thoughts about the film. And my thoughts on this movie have actually shifted quite a bit since viewing it in preparation for this review. And I hate to basically not like a film, but after viewing it in preparation for this podcast and looking at it a little bit more closely, and even getting, almost 24 hours to think about this after I viewed it to prepare for this podcast, I walked away from this film and I'm like, okay, this is a film that obviously is trying to feed off the success of a movie called When Worlds Collide from George Powell, which I believe uh, premiered about 2 years before this film, I think. And that's basically what this film is. It's about a different rogue planet getting ready to smash into the Earth. And I started thinking a little bit more about this, and I'm like, okay, and I guess we're diving right into the discussion here. Warning from Space. I need to try to figure out how to structure this to try to create a little bit more suspense, I guess. But instead of wasting time with dead air here, I'm basically doing it by the seat of my pants. And that is, what I'm trying to say is that this film has potential. This film, and I watched the Japanese cut. My version of the film actually is prettier than the one you saw, Jason, and the one that's available from Alpha Video, because the one from Alpha Video is very faded and has a lot of artifacts on it.
Yeah, this is kind of the reason why that I tried to at least avoid purchasing Alpha Video DVDs or movies. I have, because I remember getting, I think, 2, maybe 3 Gamma DVD videos at one point many years ago, and the video quality and as well as the audio, it just really wasn't good at all. So I just kind of gotten rid of those, and I tried to at least avoid any movies that both of us like, and if there's anything out there to get, if it's on that Alpha Video, I try to at least avoid it. But the video quality, even on Amazon Prime Video here, which I just recently bought a new 4K TV here, it just really wasn't good at all, and it was really hard to hear what exactly they were talking about. I even turned off my air conditioner for the time being just to watch and hear what they were talking about. It was still kind of hard to hear exactly what they were talking about. So that I have a feeling that's going to kind of somewhat affect kind of my stance on the film, but however, it's not entirely their fault. It's just kind of more or less It should have been on Alpha Video's part of at least trying to clean up both video and audio.
Well, I wouldn't even blame Alpha Video because, excuse me, they're a company that is trying to make money. They aren't a very big company, and they don't have the money nor the resources to really go through and clean that stuff up. Not to mention they're working with original transfers. And August Rigoni probably could even explain this a lot better than we could. But more or less, obviously, anyone who is kind of familiar with Japanese films coming over here to the U.S., most Japanese films, especially those that are science fiction or giant monsters, usually were not very well taken care of because they looked at them as very inferior films. There was a lot of sort of Americans looked at a lot at foreign films, especially science fiction, giant monster films, as inferior, especially when they come from other countries, because they're like, okay, well, these countries do not put up the same sort of money that we do in Hollywood to try to make these big blockbuster type films, even though Hollywood has certainly made their own share of crap. But basically, they just kind of looked at these films as silly. And so what a distribution company who bought the film and they would dub it, a lot of times the quality wasn't even there. They didn't take care of it. They didn't care because they knew, look, not a whole lot of people are going to watch this. Not a whole lot of people are going to care. Monster films and this sort of thing more or less was kind of considered schlock or inferior, lowbrow entertainment back in the day. And, you know, obviously no one could tell the future. No one could realize, hey, you know, there are going to be these things called VCRs and later DVD players and Blu-ray players and such, where people will watch these things multiple times again over the course of, you know, that they choose to do so. So obviously, I don't know if a company right now, even if they were interested in obtaining warning from space, would be able to necessarily clear up that audio. I think if a company, let's for sake of argument, Shout Factory were to obtain the rights to this film, and they got the original US dub with it, I don't think they'd be able to clean it up. They probably would have to redub the whole thing, or they would just simply release it subtitled. And yeah, kind of like what you were talking about too. The US dub was a part of my Japanese cut. And my Japanese cut, I was able to obtain somewhere by not so legal means, but it had the US dub audio on it. But yeah, and like I said too, I kept the subtitles on too because I knew this was an older film. And because I had seen the film 2 or 3 times before, I knew the audio wasn't spectacular. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to keep the subtitles up, not only because I want to see the differences between the actual dialogue in the Japanese and then the difference that comes about with the US cut as well. But also, there are moments I know I'm not going to be able to understand exactly what's being said here on the US dub. And yeah, there were many occasions throughout this film in which I was glad I had the subs up. And what was so crazy about it was throughout, I would say maybe 60 or 75% of this film, you can understand the audio well enough to get an understanding of what's being said. But and because I had the subtitles on still the entire time of I was watching the film, I still found myself looking at the subtitles more than anything else. Yeah. I got there was one scene where I got really confused in this movie between what was being said in the movie and what the subtitles were saying. And that is when we first meet the Pyrans on their ship. The Pyrans, by the way, are these one-eyed star monster type things.
Maybe kind of like starfish-like sort of aliens.
And unlike what you see from the Alpha Video DVD cover and maybe even some promo materials, even from Japan, these are not giant creatures. They're about the size of a regular person. And never do they grow any bigger than that. And I like how they're portrayed. They're basically... It's obvious that they're people in sheets with wire frames to make them look like stars. It is so friggin' cheap and at the same time Hilarious.
And especially right at the very beginning of the film, you'll basically see them right then and there. I think maybe about a minute in, you'll see them, and it also is kind of a bit awkward, just them just kind of standing there a little bit without any of the dialogue. And was it in the first several seconds of the film there, and you kind of hear some of the background noise and the like, but throughout the entire movie, though, you don't really see them as much. You probably only see them maybe in 4 to 5 scenes, but most of the time they're kind of in their human forms, and that's particularly it of seeing them in their starfish-like forms.
Well, and I want to elaborate more on the scene because I never quite finished my thought in that when I was watching this film with the subtitles on, this particular scene when we first see the Pyrans in their ship was the most confusing thing for me to follow because in the US dub, there are only two Pyrans speaking, the leader and then the main one that will end up getting transmutated into Hiroki Ozora. But in the Japanese one with the subs, it seemed like there were three, maybe four Pyrans talking. And that not only was the dialogue different in some cases, but you could tell there was a different Pyran talking. But in the US cut, with the actual dubbing and kind of how they cut it, it looked like there were only two. And so I was hearing one thing, but I was reading something entirely different on the subs. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. It seems like there's another Pyran. And it was true. There was another Pyran talking, but because of the US dub and how they made that work with really only two voices. And of course, I'm sure for budgetary reasons, they didn't want to hire one other person to do one quick voice for at least a third Pyran. They just made it two Pyrans. So that was really confusing to follow with having the English dub on and then also reading the subtitles and seeing something totally different, which like I said, kind of made it a little difficult to follow there for a couple moments. I do love, though, how this movie begins because obviously when you first see this film for the first time, and if you know really nothing about it, you go in thinking, okay, this thing is going to basically be about one-eyed starfish creatures coming down and invading Earth. Like if you look at the Alpha Video DVD cover, or maybe you see some promo material, you think, all right, you know, weird, wacky, one-eyed starfish aliens are going to come down and attack Earth. I'm all for that. And that's when the movie starts out, you see, you see, it's either one or a couple of these creatures being spotted by people across the Tokyo area, I believe it is. And you're thinking, okay, they're getting ready to slowly infiltrate. We're already starting off where maybe, hey, the attack's going to come soon. No, that's not the case. Eventually, as we get into the film. But I find it interesting that at the beginning of this movie, we see this red star, which I assume is the Pyran ship shooting multiple aliens down to Earth, yet we only see the Pyrans in Japan. And working off of that, later when the Japanese are desperately trying to convince the world leaders to use nuclear weapons on planet R, they say the world leaders are skeptical that the Pyrans exist. And I find that strange because at the beginning of the movie, like I just said a second ago, we see the Pyrans fire from the ship that I assume is a big plot hole, or the Pyrans were just stupid and decided that we're only going to convince one country that we exist, and then that country, in this case Japan, will have to convince the rest of the world that we exist and that something also needs to be done about planet R. And regardless of what the direction was, either with writing or the story, regardless of how all that was supposed to happen and how that was supposed to go down, that's bad writing. That's bad writing.
Well, yeah, it's like I know from the beginning they mentioned about going down to Japan there. I think when they were discussing things, that's one thing that I do know of. So, but I have no particular reason why either on that
Yeah.
part.
Well, and this movie is deceiving, at least in the US. I'm not sure how it was advertised in Japan with with some of its promo material. The posters, I've looked at some of the Japanese posters. You could maybe believe too that, hey, these are going to be giant one-eyed star creatures that are going to be attacking the Earth or something.
Well, it's
But
like I have the poster here. They do have one displayed on the Wikipedia. It kind of does look like there's a bunch of those starfish creatures kind of in the middle of space with some like several flying saucers, which apparently look like those that you would see in Monster Zero. And then of course theirs, and then there's kind of this huge kind of eye sort of looking thing here. I'll send this link over to you, but
well, I've seen that one on Wikipedia.
yeah,
I know which one you're talking about.
it kind of looks like there was some kind of like promotion of them, potentially invading, but that's not really the case at all.
Well, and then here's my Japanese DVD cover. And so this one, obviously, it looks like she's seeing the reflection of a pirate in a mirror.
It kind of looks like one of those horror film sort of deals.
So, I mean, this one's a little bit more accurate, but still it gives the illusion that, okay, these are big baddies. So, yeah. Okay, I have to do this just because if I don't, I might miss something, and I'm afraid that I personally at least think I cannot go on talking about the movie properly until I get these things off my chest. Mm-hmm. So the more I've thought about this movie, the more I've realized that it's a movie with a lot of unrealized potential, and a movie with major flaws as well. So I found 12 items, at least 12 items, that make this movie underwhelming and to some degree a complete and total disaster. And basically, I should just call this statement, what the hell is wrong with this film? And and I've got 12 points. So I'm going to go through the 12 points. If there's something that you want to add, Jason, go ahead and just chime in. Okay?
Sounds good.
All right. So here's point number one. The movie starts off well, but quickly becomes slow. And the movie runs at just under an hour and a half, but it feels more like an hour, 45-minute movie. By the way, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, because there are some slow things coming down on my end. It's really weird here. Okay, point number two. There's hardly anything exciting that happens except for Dr. Masuda being kidnapped, which is a very short scene, and Planet R influencing Earth's oceans and causing the occasional earthquake, which I question the science of.
Yeah, that's
the planet coming close and causing an earthquake.
That's kind of my one of my points too. It just seems a little bit long and a bit not quite as entertaining as I thought it was going to be. It's like that those particular scenes that you mentioned there were probably the most entertaining parts of it. But then once that one scientist gets kidnapped, you never see those kidnappers again, which I'm trying to figure out where the hell happened to them.
That's going to be coming up here if you're patient. We can expand upon that. I'm not saying I have the answers because I don't, but well, I'll get there. Point number three: the intrigue of the Hiroki Azura alien double, meaning the alien who transformed into this vaudeville actress, is quickly dropped, and the actual Hiroki Aozora character is never seen or heard from again. And we did hear earlier in the film that she saw this Pyran alien and basically was taken to the hospital for shock. But apparently she never left the hospital, is my guess, because we never actually see her.
I never even noticed that.
Yeah. She's gone. The only time we actually see the actual movie actress again is when she's playing this Pyran, which again comes up a few times and then she disappears throughout a large chunk. But anyway, that will come later. Point number 4. It takes 50 minutes into the movie for us to find out what the actual plot of the movie is.
So just with a half hour left of the movie, basically.
Yeah, it's a half hour left. Bad writing, to say the least. Okay. Point number 5. Much of the movie is spent at the observatory watching astronomers looking through the massive telescope.
And just, yes. same with me when it took them, with the one of the scientists just kind of looking in that telescope, that observatory there, and with all the people behind him, along with the other scientists off to the side there, it's like no one talked and just kind of staring at the sky, gazing the stars for many hours until nighttime, until he finally spots planet R.
And to think, I used to think this was a decent movie, at least after I watched it for the first time. Anyway, so let's see. Point number 6, here it is. What happened to the mafia that kidnapped Dr. Matsuda? Did they get his formula? If so, why don't we see more of them possibly selling it to foreign governments like they said they would, or watch them die trying? If they didn't get the formula, why did they leave? They are simply dropped from the story.
Yeah, and another thing, talking about the formula, did they specifically mention of what this formula was?
This formula was for what was called Element 101, or otherwise known as Urium. Urium is mentioned periodically throughout the course of the film, and it is the element for which the Pyrans eventually will make a bomb for. The Pyran that is disguised as Hiroki Aozora, when she appears to the astronomers at the observatory and then floats down, she tells them a little bit about their history and how they know about planet R coming to Earth and all that. And she knows about the formula because obviously there's that scene of her, or it, meaning that alien, that comes in and spies on Dr. Matsuda and recognizes that formula right away as Element 101, because she was saying that their civilization had discovered it many years ago, and that they ended up destroying the formula, and that because it was destructive. And then they developed another element called 102 that was basically used for good, in helping to bring about good, sustainable energy that was not used like atomic bombs to destroy each other, which, again, when you think about it, here's point 13 now, actually. I will add one extra point here, and we aren't even done yet. Point 13. If she recognized the formula for this Element 101, then why towards the end of the movie did she need to go to Dr. Matsuda to ask him what the formula for the Element 101 was, if she knew it?
That's kind of one thing that you mentioned there, is that why are they asking the human beings to come up with something when they even said themselves that their science and everything is far superior compared to our technology? Why couldn't they have dealt this in the first place without even coming down and contacting us in the first place?
Be patient. That's coming. Okay. Let's see. This is what, point 7, I think, is where we're at.
From point 13 now to point 7.
Oh, actually, No, that was the next point. Point seven. You already talked. We already just talked about that, or you did, I should say.
Nice, without even seeing what what you wrote down.
Well, and I want to add upon that because my point seven sort of adds another layer to that. I find it so weird though that when the Pyrans come and ask him, first of all, they don't bother untying him at first. They let him sit there in the chair in the sweltering heat. So earlier we saw Dr. I think it was Kimura looking through the telescope and he was having trouble. He like was fainting, right, at the observatory.
Right, yeah.
How is it that Dr. Matsuda was able to tell them what the formula was in that intense heat? Not only was he wearing an extra layer of clothes more than Dr. Kimura when Kimura faded, but also like Matsuda was exposed more to the heat because part of that wall in the room he was held captive in was open because of that strange earthquake that occurred. And so he was being exposed more to the heat from planet R.
I think it's probably more
it that like his mate, how come that his mind didn't get because you know when you're really hot, you know, the heat fatigue and all that sets in, you don't always think straight. And how, first of all, okay, again, that Pyrran alien knew what the formula was because they saw it. They're like, oh yeah, I see what you're doing there. That's element 101. That's a disaster. That's like a gigantic explosive. We did something like that and we got rid of it. But then they come and ask him what it is, even though that alien already knew what the formula was. On top of that, how was it that Dr. Matsuda, who had been kidnapped, probably traumatized, had an extra layer of clothing and exposed more to the direct heat of planet R, able to actually tell them what the formula was without actually getting some sort of fatigue and being like, oh my gosh, like it's this, but I'm not sure about this next one. Like I'm so hot. Like I don't quite remember, you know, why wasn't there more suspense? Why wasn't there more stuff built in to create intrigue? Because we know what the stakes are, but at the same time, those stakes are never really realized. And this movie just decides, let's just have a clean ending here. No suspense whatsoever, no clock ticking or anything like that, except for when they did the nuclear bombs, and even then that showed to be perfectly useless. But then when they decide, okay, we need the Urium bomb, he's got the formula, yet somehow we kind of forgot what it was. And then let's go ask him, yet he's been in the heat, he somehow remembers. How in the hell did that work? It doesn't.
My only answer to that is probably his willpower. That's my only suggestion to all of this.
It makes no damn sense. All right. So here's
and another thing when you mentioned about that one scene when they set the atomic and hydrogen bombs off on planet R. I was trying to figure out what, like, are there any explosions on planet R? Because with the film quality being fairly poor, it's like I couldn't really tell if it was maybe like specs from the film just being old or what. It's like I couldn't even tell what the difference was.
It's not the quality of your film; it's how the original film itself was made. Because the first time I saw the film too, I wondered, I'm like, okay, wait a minute. I see something. Are those the actual explosions or are those artifacts?
Yeah,
of the film.
That's where I was trying to get at with that.
Well, and even on the Japanese cut, which is a lot cleaner, by the way, I don't know why you would want a copy of this film, but if you were to get a copy of this film, get a copy of the Japanese cut because it's a lot cleaner. The colors obviously are deeper and richer. The only issue that I had with this copy was that there were a couple scenes, which I think it might be artifact related, in which there was just a little bit of like this weird, you notice it, but it doesn't affect the film viewing that much, where it's like a kind of a blinking blackness that kind of comes in a little bit. You barely notice it. At first, when I saw it, it came in during that moment in which the Pyrran alien was at the observatory and was talking to the astronomers and the heads of the self-defense force. At first, I thought maybe it was part of the film, that maybe the Pyrran, when she showed up, because of her presence, had some issue with the electrical material in the area, because if you remember at the beginning of this movie, when that ship, I believe it was the ship, fired those aliens down, there were some issues with the electrical work there temporarily. I thought that's what was going on too, that because of her presence, because she's either more radioactive or just because in general of what she's made out of, etc., that it was screwing with the electrical work. No, it was the film.
That's well, I don't know. I think it could have been at least maybe some kind of supernatural. I'm not sure because I think I might have seen that too on this version that I saw on Amazon Prime.
It's the film because it happens for a while after that too, and the alien is not in those scenes.
Well, who knows?
Okay, point 8, or technically point 9 because we did point 13 prematurely. The possible romance between Toru and Dr. Matsuda's daughter is presented numerous times in the first half of the movie, but is then dropped in the second half of the movie and goes nowhere. So therefore, basically, not only the whole point of that was not only is that just a drop plot point that ends up going nowhere, which again signals bad writing, it means there are at least 2 characters we can't even and don't even connect with. So
yeah, it just seems the more you go in here, the more that they really dropped the ball on a lot of things and just didn't go anywhere.
But I'm not done. Okay, here's another one. How the Japanese cut ends is incredibly bizarre, with people running out and cheering, as well as a few shots of animals coming out from their burrows, which I always kind of reminded me of those weird Looney Tune cartoons, those old Looney Tune cartoons.
Or like some of those Disney movies too.
Yeah, and so there's nothing about a message or a central theme to the movie, nor is there anything else involving the Pyrans and or the relationship to Earth. And the U.S. cut ends with the extra scene that we discussed earlier about the reverse transmutation of the lead Pyran from it looking like Hiroki Azura back into an alien. And the process, again, takes too long and is really unnecessary. Again, no expanding. There's no theme. It's not like nuclear weapons are bad or humanity needs to come together. I guess you could say, yes, humanity needs to come together is sort of the central theme of this film, and or that regardless of who you are, human or alien, we all need to come together to save each other for life purposes. But the thing is that that's never really a message that is explored even into further depth in this movie, because this movie just isn't good.
Well, it also kind of makes you think that whoever is going to view this movie and kind of realizes that it also kind of makes it feel like was the alien parts just kind of put in there at the last second and trying to make something at least entertaining sort of thing. And, you know, just when you kind of look at the movie, maybe without the alien parts, you can definitely tell that it's the whole movie just really could not survive at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's very possible that could be the case, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, maybe that's the reason why that they added that in the U.S. cut, the final scene with the Pyran alien transmutating back to its original form. I'm probably guessing they kind of realized that it kind of felt like that the aliens never even happened to begin with at the very end, so they probably had to add kind of the same scene from an earlier part of the movie, but reverse it.
It very well could be. I mean, I wasn't able to find a ton of information on this film because it's an obscure title, and rightfully so.
Yeah, but it seems like there hasn't been a whole lot of information too from what I've seen.
Right. And my next point is one that you sort of brought up a little bit earlier here, is that the Pyrans disappear throughout much of the latter part of the film when they could and should have been more proactive in helping Earth come up with a solution to Planet R. And since the Pyrans knew that the solution to destroying Planet R required Urium, why the hell did they wait until the very last moment to track Dr. Masuda, who was wearing one of their tracking rings, if you remember, and get the formula from him?
Yeah, kind of like what you said earlier. It pertains more to the bad writing part of the film, and it really shows. Obviously, I was kind of saying that to myself when he got kidnapped there. And they showed him at least a few more times in that chair tied up, and as well as that kind of from the tidal wave or whatever it is with the planet R coming and kind of wreaking havoc a little bit and part of that building coming down. You would have at least should have put to consideration maybe a couple scenes before that, have the aliens find out and track him down where he's at and get him out of that situation. But
Well, and see, there were what, at least 3 or 4 of those pyrans that came and got him. They are dicks. Why couldn't at least one of them have helped get him to the observatory safely?
yeah, it's like you said, it's just bad writing all over.
Bad writing all over. And again, I'm not done yet. Okay. Going off the ending a bit again, the solution is too quick and any suspense is killed because once the pyrans get the formula, the next scene we see them in is when they launch the rocket at planet R and destroy it. In fact, while we do see some suspense and stakes in the film, they are never really displayed to full effect nor realized the way they should have been, creating a disappointing special effects disaster movie.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of special effects disaster,
I thought you were going to say, speaking of disaster, how about this film?
The visual effects for the transmutation part, where they just used cheap like little springs, just kind of as like little rays, and just overlay on the transmutation part.
That was fine. I sort of forgive that just because, like you said earlier, and I do agree this is one of like 2 or 3 really good things about this film is that that whole transmutation scene, even though it's way too long, they do a very good job of trying to make it look real.
At least that's probably, unfortunately, the best part of the film, as far as I can think of right now.
The setup is there, and it looks the whole film in terms of its sets, even though there aren't too many of them, they look marvelous.
Mm-hmm.
But because the actual substance, meaning the writing, is so bad, the whole film more or less falls apart.
Speaking of falling apart,
let's go back to this movie. I've got one more point, and like I said, these are the points that I saw. Remember, there are 13 of them, and there probably could have been more had I thought about this film even more. So here's the final point that I have. We see earlier in the film the pyrans would leave some sort of small blue flame-like substance that was sort of a trail behind them. We're never shown again what that substance was, nor why they left it behind and what it contained and what the point of it was, because it was considered sort of a big point, at least early in the film, when people started seeing the pyrans.
Like I have to say, bad writing once again.
I'm not sure exactly where to go here. I had to get that off my chest.
I think both you and I have pretty much discussed just about everything that we can think of on this.
Well, and going back to one of the points, the point where it takes 50 minutes into the movie before we really find out what the actual plot of the movie is. Before that, obviously, you get the Pyran that looks like Hiroki Azura. It is first discovered in a lake looking like her. And so Toro and Dr. Matsuda's daughter, and really the only sort of romantic scene that we see them in during this movie, they're out in a rowboat and they see her and they bring her to shore. There's that intrigue with her because they're like, oh my gosh, like this woman. At first they think she probably drowned or whatever. Then they realize, no, she survived. But it's just like, who is she? You know, we know nothing about, which I find is weird because it's like, it sounded like another problem, point 14, with this movie. They're like, they don't know who she is, but yet earlier in the film, they say Hiroki Azura is like the really big, like one of the big entertainment stars of like
Yeah,
Tokyo.
that's also another thing I kind of noticed too, with her being one of the main leads and being kind of this big star in Japan. You wouldn't have thought there would be at least a lot of people that would notice her, but with this scene here, that obviously wasn't the case at all. You would think everybody would have.
Well, it's like you and I, if we were to go like boating and then we came across a body that looked like Arnold Schwarzenegger and we bring him to shore and we're just like, I don't know, who is this? This is a mysterious guy. Like, just, that's another issue here is how come they don't know Hiroki Azura? I'm not saying that not everybody's going to know such a person, but they make such a big deal out of her earlier in this film being this huge entertainment star in the country. I find it hard to believe that not only would Toru would be that closed off, but even like all those people that surrounded her or it on the shore, that nobody, not even one single person, um, you know, recognized who who she was. It boggles my mind.
Yeah, I don't know what else to tell you.
And then there's that scene at the tennis court where they're playing tennis with her, and then at one moment, I'm just going to call her she from now on. She jumps up like 10 feet in the air or whatever, and then swats the tennis ball down, and they're all like, oh my gosh, like no human can do that and all that. They focus on it for a short period of time, and then again it's dropped. And like I was saying earlier, the whole mystery and the whole suspense behind who this woman is and all that's quickly dropped because they're like, okay, we quickly solved it. Because when Dr. Isobe, Matsuda, and Kimura come together at one point, this was after Azura confronted Dr. Matsuda and knew what the formula was. They all come together, and I think it's Isobe was saying that, oh, they took some blood and they found that there's more white blood cells than the human body could actually take. And then another weird moment here, they took some of the sweat from her cap that she was wearing at the tennis court, and they found something weird with that too.
And then prints 2 off the tennis racket.
Dumb shit. Like I said, I used to think this was a halfway decent movie, but then again, most of the time when I watch movies, I turn my brain off because I just go along for the ride unless something is glaringly obvious. Like if you were to sit me down and say, okay, this is going to be a Batman animated movie. You know, it's a typical Batman animated movie. You're going to see Batman, Robin, Joker, and like some of the typical Batman villains, okay? And I sit down and watch the movie, and then at some point, all of a sudden, there's maybe, I don't know, what would I see? Let's just say I see He-Man or something like in the middle of it. I'm just like, wait a minute. Like, that's not supposed to be here. And just...
Yeah. Can we just get this over with?
Sure. Let's go into final thoughts and then whether it's a buy, rent, or pass, which I think we kind of know where this is going.
Yeah, as far as the entertainment value of Warning from Space, there's really not much I can see in as far as really entertaining anybody. Uh, while I had
Nope.
this, while I had this movie on, I think for the first several minutes, I was actually just kind of doing some of my usual stuff on my laptop. That's kind of how, um, how how would I put it? How much attention that I got from me. So it wasn't quite a whole lot. So yeah, that's kind of one of the reasons that kind of like what Kent mentioned about the tennis thing. I didn't I didn't even pay attention that there was that kind of tennis scene in there. And when I kind of started paying more attention to the film, when the scientists mentioned a like fingerprints on a tennis racket, I was like, "What the hell are they even talking about?" That's uh, how much entertainment value that this movie kind of got out for me. It really didn't entertain me as much, and kind of like what Kent is kind of showing me here, that yeah, it's kind of pretty boring, and kind of a snooze fest in a way. But yeah, kind of like what he said in one of the points there, it felt like about a 2 hour movie, even though it's around an hour and a half.
Barely under it, like 4 minutes under that.
From what I saw, it was around an hour 28. So just
That's
about,
because you had that extra 2 minute scene of the
yeah,
reverse transmutation.
yeah,
That unnecessary scene.
yeah. The only good thing about this was, excuse me, like I mentioned, they at least took the time on the transmutation part, even though that it really took quite some time to get from point A to point B and then back again from the very end when the main Pyron was transmutating back to its starfish alien-like form. But although they're like some of the settings were good, the characters, I think they at least tried their best, but they pretty much had to go off on a shitty script. I'm sorry, but that's kind of how it was. So with that, I I probably would say it's a barely a rental. I would at least see it once, but then maybe not see it again.
Wow, that's a little bit of a surprise there.
Like I said, a barely rental. It's on a borderline. I would
I,
at least have someone see it just once, and just to kind of get their own opinion. But I'm kind of guessing on what their opinion is going to be after watching the entire film. So it's at least kind of a one and done movie.
I want to bring up 2 points before I get into my final thought on this film. One point is kind of regardless of what we say on this podcast or what you hear on any other podcast or anything else, um, if you are a super fan like we are, regardless of what you hear on something like this or somewhere else, you're more than likely going to check this stuff out anyway. Because I knew about Warning from Space. I had briefly read some of the reviews before I bought the DVD, like about 2 years ago or whenever it was. And I knew people didn't like it. But because I'm a super fan, I love Japanese science fiction and all that. And to me, this looked like it was, like I said, it looked like it was going to be a giant one-eyed starfish attacking the Earth. I'm like,
That's
why
kind of
not
what
give
I
it a try?
thought too.
You know, and yeah, when I first watched it, I thought it was a decent film. It had flaws, it had issues, but I'm like, it's okay. And then the other couple times I saw it, I'm like, it's okay. I mean, it's not my favorite, but I started noticing like the pace was a little bit more slow. And then it wasn't until this viewing that I realized, no, this is a train wreck of a film. So regardless of what we say here, I know a lot of super fans are going to go out there and check it because you're completists and you enjoy the sort of thing. That's fine. I understand completely because, like I said, I'm a completist and I'm a super fan, and I knew people didn't like this film, but I still went out, bought the Alpha Video DVD at the time, and still watched it. So again, I still encourage people to go watch these films and make up their own minds, because there are movies that I really enjoy that most fans don't like, and vice versa. Point number two, you brought up something that I didn't think about until after I watched this film in preparation for this podcast, in that I realized, with the exception of watching the film to prepare for this podcast, the 2 or 3 other times I had watched this film, I actually didn't really pay close attention throughout most of the film. And that should have been an indication to me that there is something fatally flawed with this film, meaning that not only is it just not exciting, it feels a lot longer than what it is.
Right.
So that should have been an indication to me going into the film, like, okay, there's something wrong here. So here are my final thoughts about the film. Warning from Space is a movie with tremendous ambitions, but it comes up incredibly short due to bad writing and possibly budgetary reasons as well. That's something we actually didn't discuss here, was that, again, I couldn't find any figures on budget or anything like that, so maybe part of the reason why maybe more disaster scenes weren't shown was budget, perhaps. I'm not sure, but that may be a possibility. The film starts out very promising, but quickly turns into a slog that has always been difficult for me to fully pay attention. Plot threads are dropped, it takes too long to learn about the true plot of the film, characters disappear, things don't make any damn sense, stupid decisions are made, etc. Basically everything we covered earlier in the discussion, and probably even more than we didn't discuss, are huge problems for this film. I usually am willing to overlook many films' flaws unless there are huge flaws or too many flaws. This film has both. While I enjoy the actual look of this film, the substance of it is abysmal. It's not exciting. Hardly anything worthwhile happens in the film. We are never interested in the characters, nor do we care if they live or perish. Quite frankly, if everybody perished in this film, I probably would give it a thumbs up. Because it's just, I was wanting just something to happen at some point in this film. Warning from Space is a film that had a ton of potential, but never even came close to achieving even a sliver's worth of that potential. It's a bad film. It truly is, and that saddens me, considering I used to find this to be a decent film until I really looked at it in preparation for this review. It's dull, it's slow, it's deceiving in that nearly all of the posters make the viewer believe Earth will be attacked by starfish monsters. It's also uninteresting. I would recommend staying away from this film. It is not worth your time. Pass.
Well, it's like, I know with my thing where it's barely rental, I might have to add, if you have an Amazon Prime, you wouldn't even have to spend any of your money, because
technically a little bit of your money is paying for that film.
I would say maybe a half penny or something. But still, it's at least free on when you have Amazon Prime. So
if you have Prime and, and you're curious or something,
yes,
do so. But
I would say
here's the biggest warning. It's going to feel very long and nothing truly exciting happens. So if you're looking to spend an hour 26, which will feel like 2.5 hours of your life, go ahead, check it out.
and plus, and also in advance, like both of us have mentioned earlier, that the video quality and as well as the audio is pretty poor, because it's I have nothing else to describe it. And plus the video on Amazon Prime, you can definitely tell, like on the very top of the thing, it's like the very bottom. So it's kind of like the video is kind of tilted down just a bit. So that also kind of affects.
Even Amazon, in a very subversive way, is trying to discourage you from watching the film.
Basically, yeah.
We have to offer this film, but yet we don't want you to watch it. So we're gonna like
even if you have a 65-inch 4K TV like I have, that's how much it's telling you.
Well, it just, you know, and like I said, it kind of saddens me to not like this film because, like I said, I used to think it was a decent film. I never thought it was anything special. And I could understand why it was so obscure.
In the way that you were kind of talking about it earlier, maybe like months before we did the review on this film, I kind of thought it might be pretty good to at least take a look at it. But then after watching it last night, I was like, boy, that was kind of a letdown for me.
That was a movie. It wasn't necessarily a good one, but it was a movie.
Yeah.
I still would maybe watch this movie over other movies, just in general, not necessarily other kaiju films or whatever, but I would watch it over a film like Grease. but I don't know what that's saying. I mean, in my opinion, Grease is not a good film, but I don't know. I guess some of you out there may be wondering, okay, Kent, you don't care for this film and you don't like Shin Godzilla either. Let's say you're on an island and you're offered two movies, Warning from Space and Shin Godzilla. Which one would you watch? That's a dirty trick, I would say, at first.
If it was me, I probably would actually pick Shin Godzilla over this one because it has more of the entertainment value.
Well, and you don't necessarily dislike Shin Godzilla to the extent that I do. Like, I really dislike Shin Godzilla. You were like, yeah, it's not really a good film. I'm like, no, this is a bad film. I probably would pick Shin Godzilla 2 barely because, yeah, I mean, I can actually understand the English dub, and there's a little bit more entertainment value, and you can actually know the crappiness that
you can actually know what is going on, at least.
Well, I know what's going on in Warning from Space. It's just that there are so many things that are bad with the writing. And I'm not saying Shin Godzilla is a marvel of writing. As we've discussed when we talked about that like over a year and a half ago now, and as I wrote on our website, there are huge issues with that film too. In my personal opinion, that film doesn't deserve the Japanese Academy Award because in my opinion, it's not a very good film. But it's a film that, while it has a lot of glaring flaws with it, we know pretty early on in Shin Godzilla what the film is about. And very few things compared to this film, Warning from Space, are dropped and just kind of disappear without explanation. That does happen in Shin Godzilla, but not to the extent that it does here. And like both you and I were saying, it's actually pretty hard to pay attention to this film. It really is. And it tried to... The thing is that, okay, Gorath came about 6 years after this film. Gorath is a very... Have we actually covered that yet? Did we?
I think it was a few years ago.
I thought we did. And then I did a commentary for it as well. I know that.
I think it was around the time when we used to have been PXCR.
Yeah, and because I've been like, I thought at one point I watched it for a podcast, and I knew I did the commentary, but...
Yeah, because I remember, was it Amazon used to have... I think used to have that as a free thing when you were a Prime member, and I think that they took it off for a while, but then I think they put it back as a free Prime thing now.
And Gorath, there are issues with that movie too, especially that ending. That ending, wow. This talk about Toho science. That movie is more entertaining, and part of it though too is because there are a lot of actors that we're more familiar with, but there's just more substance too. And compared to this movie, it's written better,
and it's much more entertaining.
Yeah, and then on top of that, this movie, along with Gorath, are both inspired from the movie When Worlds Collide. I don't know if you've seen the film. Have you, Jason?
I have heard of it, but I don't think I have actually seen it.
I got it here late last summer, and I watched it last October, I believe it was. And it's a pretty good film. Um, and what makes that movie entertaining too is that not there are characters you like and can go along with. There are entertaining scenes. There are things that happen, and when the planet is ready to collide, like there's actual stuff going on.
Mhm.
It delivers on the action and the special effects. This movie teases you on so many levels, and then it pulls away like right at the moment. Like things are just beginning to happen. It's like, nope, we're gonna pull back, and we're gonna pull back hard on it. Just like with all the tidal waves and all that coming up into Japan, and then the strange earthquake that was happening. Like I said, I question the science of that particular thing, but like that's all that they did. It's just like, yeah, that's kind of cool, but it didn't last long, and there wasn't much to it. There weren't other things that happened, and you know, if you've seen Gorath, there's more that goes on. There are better effects. You see more of a disaster and things like that. Same thing with When Worlds Collide. You see a lot more things going on there as well. And I would recommend Gorath and When Worlds Collide over this movie any day, because it's basically When Worlds Collide, except you have some alien partner with helping out the humans. And this is actually significantly more dull than either of those two films. Gorath has its own crazy go nuts things with it, but it's an easier pill to swallow. Again, up until that ending, but it's just a more entertaining experience. You walk away actually feeling at least more or less satisfied with what you've seen.
Mm-hmm.
And it, like I said, I don't like to dislike some films, but sometimes they make me dislike them. And this is one of those films.
Just speaking of which, just like Demi King.
We're not even going to get it. I'm so glad we actually took that off the schedule. And that is right now, for an indefinite period of time, going to be kept off the list.
Until we have no movies left to review, or TV shows for that matter.
Yeah, I would rather, and this is an actual movie, I would rather watch and review Monstered than
really? Is that
it's an actual film. It's a very, very, very cheap film. But it's a real film. Go look it up if you don't believe me. It's a real thing.
No, it just sounds ridiculous.
Guess what? It is. It's exactly as it sounds.
Just kind of like Zarkor and was it Kra?
Those are probably better. Yeah, they probably are. Oh my gosh. Does that mean we have to cover those?
Maybe at some point, but we don't have to do it now.
Well, we did cover Kong. Kong's technically not kaiju, but he is a giant monster. But the thing is, though, too, we never covered like Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. You know, those types of films, or Deadly Mantis or whatever.
Yeah.
But we covered Kong because Kong not only helped create Godzilla, which helped start the kaiju genre in Japan, but Kong also appeared in 2 Japanese films.
Mm-hmm. And plus, he's going to collide with Godzilla, was it next year? No, 2 years from now.
Yeah. Yeah. That's something to think about.
It's probably going to have to come to that point because, I mean, it deals with monsters, and look at us. We deal with.
I remember I watched
with monsters.
The movie Zarkor and Kra, and I remember watching Zarkor, and I remember you and I both watched, and we were like, that was the dumbest thing ever. And then we watched Kra. Kra was not great, but it actually delivered a little bit more on the action than Zarkor did. Both of those films were made by like the same company and the same group of people, but Craw came second.
And then you also have to remember that we've also reviewed Pulgasari.
Pulgasari this is bonus material for everybody out there. Pulgasari, I haven't watched all of it again since we last watched it, like 4 years ago or whenever it was.
Yeah.
But I've seen bits and parts of it. And the bits and parts of it that I have seen since that last review, I'm looking at them like, okay, this thing still is pretty crazy and just kind of like out there in certain respects. But it's not as crazy as I remembered it or maybe thought it was. I would watch probably Pulgasari over Warning from Space.
And one of these times too, I think I saw it on YouTube that it does have a sequel called Bulgasari. So one of these times we should probably get around to it. I'll probably have to see if it's still on YouTube or something.
Oh, those crazies. But yeah.
Well, other than that, I don't really have anything else.
I don't either. And again, just as a reminder for everybody, there will not be any podcast for at least the next month. We will kind of let everybody in the know as far as what's to come. So let me quickly pull up the calendar here. So that means no podcasts on June 2nd, nor the 16th. The next podcast would be the 30th. We should be able to do something then.
Yeah.
So it just kind of depends on whether or not we're going to be talking about Golden Bat or the G-Fest.
Depending upon the schedule.
Depending upon when that is released, yeah. So if the schedule isn't released, then we're going to do Golden Bat. And if that's the case, if we do Golden Bat on the 30th, then you're coming over here.
I'll be at your place on the 7th. I'm going to be traveling there on the 6th of July, but I'll be staying over the night over at the Crown Plaza there.
Yeah. So something you and I could potentially do before we leave for Chicago is either maybe like on the 8th or 9th or something like that. Because definitely by then I would think the schedule would be released if it's not already out by the 30th of June. We could create like we could do the next episode and talk about the schedule then and before we head to Chicago. Otherwise, we will talk about the schedule on the 30th, and then we'll just wait until G-Fest, and then when we go to G-Fest, we'll have the occasional updates and some live videos and
depending upon the Wi-Fi connection, because over the years it's kind of a hit and a miss at times.
I think too, even like our LG, I think can sometimes be spotty too because the building's practically concrete. I think too, if I remember, like I think even the LG's, even your mobile data gets a little screwy too.
Yeah, and I think that one year when we were at the very top, you could hardly get any connection whatsoever.
I'm hoping we're still closer to the lower level.
Yeah, I'm kind of hoping that we get, was it the 3rd floor, like we've gotten at least a couple times, where
or even the 1st floor,
where it kind of face the kind of that hallway where you look down. Because I know we've gotten that room twice exactly.
Well, you know what you should have done when you made the reservations is like, yeah, can we try to have a room like no higher than floor 3?
Well, I think when I did check in, I know you asked me before. I think it was last year. Yeah, see if we can get a lower floor room.
Did you try that this time?
That would have to be when we go there and check in.
Yeah, I'm thinking next year, maybe when we make the reservation, we can ask if we could be like, okay, yeah, we want to reserve a room for G-Fest. Here's the code. Is it possible to get a room, but no higher than like floor 3 or something like that.
Well, it seemed, and too, like you've noticed as well, that the past few years or 2 years with that GFS code, the only room we've been getting was that was it the king bed, like one king bed with that couch,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm trying to figure out the reason why behind that.
I don't care. That's not bugging me. But what's bugging me is if we're like, you know, halfway up the hotel or higher.
Yeah.
Because my gosh, like I think that bonus stuff for everybody again. It seems like that. I think the first year, which was maybe I think it was year 3 when we went, so it would have been 2014. I think. I think that was maybe the first year in which we got a higher floor. It was like floor 12 or whatever it was. And I remember, my gosh, like, before we realized the fire stairs didn't have an alarm on them,
Mm-hmm.
we found that out like a year later, I think. And, you and I were waiting for the elevator, but because the higher floor you're on, the more stops you have to make and the longer it takes for you to get up to your floor.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember like after certain events, especially after like Saturday when you have the costume parade and everybody's bomb rushing to the
Oh
elevators.
yeah, that's like the worst time.
Not only does that just in general suck, and I get claustrophobic in large crowds, not only just in general does that part suck, but when you actually do get on the elevator and you're trying to go up, like no joke, you are stopping like on almost every floor on your way up, and it can take a good while to get up there. And what's so great, I mean, we could have taken the steps, but my gosh, I'm not joking when I say this. If you're high enough in that hotel and you take the stairs to either go up or down, you get dizzy after a few flights.
Oh yeah, same here.
They're tight. They're tight stairs. And you literally like almost can take 1 or 2 steps and then you turn. Take 1 or 2 steps and you turn. Take 1 or 2 steps and you turn.
It also kind of, you'll start to kind of feel a little bit, what is it?
Lightheaded.
A little bit lightheaded, and I think you kind of lose track of where you're at times.
That's because you're high up, and so you're either just going all the way down or going all the way up, and you're just not paying attention.
Yeah.
And it just, that's something we need to look in for like the future is like, okay, can we try to get a room no higher than like floor 3 and we can make up something like, I've got some sort of iron deficiency and I can't be higher than this elevation.
Well, I know the last couple of years at least we've, especially after the costume parade, we just stay over at the bar and just let everyone, just take the elevators while we just kind of wait until everyone's kind of left or have left to the Pickwick Theater.
Well, yeah, I mean, we, of course, after 1 or 2 years of being there and finding out the hard way, what goes on at certain points, you kind of know exactly how certain things turn out. And so not only do we do that to avoid the crowds for like 10, 15 minutes, but we do that as a means of celebration too. So it's kind of hitting 2 birds with one stone as well. But yeah, I mean, that's nuts. But, I mean, if we're on a lower level, I take the stairs because I'm just like, look, we're on floor 3 or 4 or 5. I'm like, I'm just going to use the stairs. I'm going to climb up. I'm not going to take the stupid elevator.
Yeah. So other than that, I think
we're done. So yeah, next episode, June 30th, it'll either be Golden Bat or GFest schedule. We will let everyone know about what we're going to cover and the time. We need to be better about trying to get the time up and letting people know sooner.
Yes. Yeah. So try to get a hold of me. And
or you get a hold of me too, because I could be busy too and forget. So we both need to like really be on the ball about that.
Yeah.
But anyway, thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. Stay away from Warning from Space unless you're a huge super fan like we are. You're going to watch it anyway at some point, but I would recommend staying away from it. It's not worth your time.
And if you have Amazon Prime too, that would probably be the best way to at least see it.
Yeah. So thank you for listening. check back June 30th when we either discuss the G Fest 25 schedule or we will talk about one of my kind of guilty pleasures, Golden Bat.
All right. Catch you later, folks.